Hey y'all, I'm Mark Adams. Before I dive into this sad story, let me tell you a bit about myself and my ex-wife Jennifer. I'm 510 pounds, down 180 pounds from before. I keep in shape by running 2 laps around the park every morning, swimming a bunch each week, and hitting up the gym twice a week for weightlifting and MMA training. I may not be Bruce Lee, but I'm all about that muscle life. Some say I look like George Clooney, and I've got a master's degree in computer tech. I got my post-grad degree in business management and a bachelor's in economics from Oxford University in England. My dad worked as a translator at the US Embassy, which brought us to England. He moved to the States after his job there, but I decided to stick around and finish my studies. Now I run my own computer repair business, and I'm also developing a new software that's gonna be versatile for gaming, military, and more. Its standout feature is that it operates in real time. Yo, we need to be able to solve problems and get this thing sorted out in the next 6 to 12 months. My sis Patricia, aka Party Pat, is 2 years younger than me. We're super close and tell each other everything, no secrets. She's working as a junior partner at a fancy law firm in New York State. My ex-wife Jennifer is 5 feet 3 inches and 110 pounds. She stays fit by hitting the gym 4 times a week. And man, her smile can brighten up any room. Jennifer is a total babe with a 34B rack, a tiny 22-inch waist, and 33-inch hips. She's got fiery red hair and green eyes to match her fiery personality. Jennifer's got a law degree and works as a corporate attorney for XYZ, a PR and advertising company. We first met at Pat's graduation, where we found out we lived just 3 miles away from each other in the same mid-sized town. Pat and Jennifer's sister Amy were roomies in college and introduced us at the party. In the town of Freestone, Texas, our connection was instant and we started dating. 6 months later, we got married. Jennifer began her career as a junior attorney at XYZ, making a decent 5-figure salary plus bonuses. Meanwhile, I worked as a software code compiler and DX compiler for ABC flight controllers, also earning a reasonable 5-figure salary with bonuses. We lived in a nice neighborhood in a 3-bedroom house that was passed down to me by my grandparents. Despite Jennifer's parents and sister living nearby, Pat received a large inheritance. Back in New York, my parents moved to Florida when they retired. We would see our families about twice a year, switching between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We had good jobs, nice cars, and took trips every other year. Life was pretty good. Then Jen got promoted to junior partner at work, which was a big deal. She started working late and going out with her friends on Friday nights. I started to get suspicious and started doing things like checking up on her. I was snooping through her stuff, reading her emails, and even put a keylogger on her laptop. But, even after all that paranoia, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in our marriage. I didn't find any proof of her cheating, but I decided to follow Jen one night while she was kicking ass at work, aiming to become a senior partner in 5 years. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a dead-end job at a family-owned company where promotions were only given to relatives, no matter how hard you worked. I was getting fed up with the lack of opportunities for advancement. I decided to start my own business fixing computers for companies and making sure they're secure. Instead of just doing regular repairs like other places, I was all about upgrading systems and adding top-notch security features. Even though I knew it might take a while to get going, my research showed that I could make some serious money within a year, more than what I was making before. I talked to Jen about it and told her that things might be tough at first, but it would pay off in the long run. To keep things simple, I decided not to. So, I was telling her about this new project I was doing, and she was totally against it. She was like, "Why would we take such a big risk when things are going great? She's doing so well, but I feel stuck in this dead-end job." Jen and I always kept our money separate, except for our joint account that covered all our bills. We both put in the same amount to cover half the expenses and kept the rest for ourselves. I decided to leave my job and start my new business using my savings and a loan against my home. I rented a small workshop to get things going. So, I set up shop with an office and started hustling, making calls. Within 3 months, I had covered my costs and was feeling pretty pleased with myself. I was also making progress on a new project when out of the blue, Jen hit me with some news she was 3 months pregnant with twins. My first thought was to check the calendar, and lo and behold, I realized she had been in Miami on a business trip around the time of conception. That got me thinking she might have been up to no good, so I decided to get a DNA test done pronto. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she stopped getting freaky with me, saying she was worried about the baby's safety. I tried telling her she was being paranoid and even got the doctor to back me up, but she stuck to her guns. This meant I went without for a good 6 months. I did my bit during her pregnancy though, going to relaxation classes with her, rubbing oil on her belly to stop stretch marks, giving her foot massages every night, and putting up with her mood swings getting worse. While my business was doing well, I hired Greg, a fresh college grad, to help with computers, and May came on as a receptionist. I never talked about my business with Jen because she didn't seem interested. Then one afternoon, while I was meeting with a client to talk about server upgrades, I got the call that the baby was on the way and I had to rush to the hospital. I told the client what was up and they were cool about it, even praised me before giving me some time off. I was ready for this and expected it, so Jen didn't need to call anyone. I had to call an ambulance because I was really close to home when I got there. Jen was already packed and ready with her hospital bag. Once she was settled in the car, I grabbed her bag and the DNA kit before driving her to the hospital. After a checkup, she was admitted to the maternity ward with her own room. Even though I had doubts about the twins' paternity, I was still excited about becoming a dad. The doctor told me to go home since it would be a while before delivery, so I left, grabbed a bite to eat, and waited until I passed out. I was knocked out when the hospital called saying Jen was ready to pop with contractions every 7 minutes. I dashed to the hospital in the wee hours wearing just a coat and got there in no time. A nurse led me to the delivery room where I saw my wife in labor and witnessed the birth of our babies. While the nurse checked on them, I sneakily grabbed DNA samples from each kid for testing. Even though I already felt a bond with them, I needed to make sure I was the dad. I went up to Jen and gave her a nice kiss, but I could see the pain in her eyes as she told me she loved me. Eventually, I was told to leave because Jen had been taken to the recovery unit to rest. The next day, I called everyone to share the good news. The grandparents were thrilled and couldn't wait to meet their grandkids. Pat and Amy said they would try to take some time off to visit their nieces and nephew. I went to the hospital with a big bouquet for Jen and dropped off the DNA kit on the way. So, the doctor said it would take about 10 days for the test results to come back. He also said Jen would have to stay in the hospital because she had some serious tearing from giving birth and needed time to heal. I visited her a bunch of times over the next 5 days, but she seemed distant and detached. I asked the doctor about it, and he said it was normal and she would get better eventually. When I saw her on Friday, the doctor said she could go home on Saturday afternoon. I had already set up the nursery for our baby. So, I had these new babies and I was so excited to bring them home on Saturday morning. I made sure the cribs were safe and all set up for their arrival at 1:30. I went to the hospital to pick up my family, but when I got to her room, it was empty. I asked the nurse where my wife and kids were, and to my surprise, I found out that someone else had already picked them up. I tried asking the nurse and calling Jen's cell phone, but I couldn't get any information. When shit hit the fan, things got real serious real quick. Security and cops got involved because there was a fear of a kidnapping. They looked at surveillance footage and saw that Jen had left on her own with some random dude. They told me to go back home and said they'd be in touch. So there I was, feeling like crap and waiting for updates around 6 p.m. Someone knocked on the door and when I peeked out, I saw those 2 investigators again. I let them in and noticed that neither of them would look me in the eye. I asked what was going on, and the woman spoke up first, saying, "Mr. Adams, we checked on your wife and kids, and they're safe. But we can't tell you where they are." I was so confused. Where is my family? Why isn't Jenny answering her phone? The male detective then said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your wife has left you with the kids. She said her lawyer will be in touch." Hey, I'm really sorry. Don't do anything crazy until you hear from her. It sucks to see you struggling with this. They ditched me again. It felt like my heart was breaking and tears were just flowing. I was at rock bottom on Sunday morning. I cried myself to sleep and when I woke up, I just went through the motions of getting ready for the day. After breakfast, I felt a bit better and decided to call Jen's parents, hoping they could help. So, I called up Jen's dad and he was all excited, saying they were gonna come over next weekend. But I cut him off and told him what went down with Jen. He couldn't believe it and said he'd talk to her and hit me back. By the time lunch rolled around, I was at Denny's stuffing my face with a greasy meal, a big burger, fries, onion rings, and a beer. It made me feel a bit better. When I got back home, I checked the answering machine for any messages, but there was nothing. I switched on the TV, but my mind was still elsewhere, trying to make sense of everything. After all the drama, I was just like, screw it, and checked the time. Turns out it was way past midnight, so I hit the sack. Couldn't sleep for crap though, my mind was all over the place. So, I gave in at 6 a.m., dragged my butt out of bed, took a quick shower, and headed downstairs for some breakfast. As I was chilling and watching the news on TV, the phone rings. I'm sitting there wondering what's next when Jen's lawyer calls asking if I can make a meeting later that day. We settled on 2 o'clock, he hangs up, and I'm left hoping for some damn answers. When I got to his office, they whisked me right in. Totally wasn't expecting that. So I was supposed to meet just Jen's lawyer, but to my surprise, my wife and her boss Carl Prescott were also there on the couch. Even though I wanted some clarification, I decided not to be the one to break the silence. I just sat there and waited. It seemed like my silence made everyone uncomfortable, just as I had planned. Eventually, the lawyer spoke up first. Mr. Adams, I called you here to discuss the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Jennifer Adams. Your wife and Mr. Prescott have a proposal. They want her to divorce you because... Listen, we've got some serious issues here. You get to keep your house, retirement benefits, all your money, and your business. Mrs. Adams gets to keep her stuff too. But you have to agree to let Mr. Prescott adopt the kids. In return, he'll give you $2 million in any account you want. I was so mad, I almost flipped the desk when I got up. My kids are not for sale, no matter the price. You can have that woman for free, I want nothing to do with her. So, Jennifer, just go away. And Mark, let's talk this out. Look, I never meant to hurt you, but I know I did and I'm really sorry about that. I've been with Carl for a while now and we're planning to tie the knot. Unfortunately, Carl can't have kids of his own, so we're thinking about adopting. We can give those kids everything they need: a great home, a top-notch education, and a good head start in life. What can you offer? An old house with a small computer repair business. You never really had much ambition or financial stability. Think about giving those kids a shot. If you don't cooperate, well, I'll have to do what I have to do. Rosser is threatening to take you to court and make sure you end up with nothing. He's also banning you from seeing your kids, taking half of your money, and shutting down your business. It's a lose-lose situation for you, but at least you'll get something out of it. Jen, the house is legally mine, so you can't claim any rights to it. I don't have much in savings, so your demand for half of it is pointless. You make more money than me, so any support you give will be minimal. I'll still take care of our kids, even if I only see them sometimes. The business won't survive without me anyway. I ain't got 41 grand for you to steal. See you in court. With that, I just walked away, leaving 3 confused people behind. I went straight to Dan's, grabbed some dinner and a beer. Then I went back to my empty, cold house and sat down with a beer to watch TV. I was still pissed off around 11 when a knock on the door scared the crap out of me. Still shocked, I didn't even bother to check who it was before opening the door. It swung open so hard that I almost fell back, but I managed to stay on my feet. These dudes busted into the room and tried to snatch me. I was ready for a fight, so I took out the first guy with one hit. The second dude tried to grab my head, but I dodged him. Then the third dude got me with a hit that knocked me down. While the first guy was catching his breath, the other 2 kept kicking me non-stop until I passed out. Scared for my safety, I decided to leave it to the cops to handle. The boss wanted me to sign some form, and when he threatened me, I couldn't take it anymore and I hit him out of rebellion. My head was telling him to back off, but that punch left some of his DNA on me. Kirsten got mad and backed off, knocked me out for a bit, then started kicking me. I slowly came to, hearing voices but not knowing where they were coming from. The room was blurry, but then my vision cleared up before going dark again. When I woke up, sunlight was coming through the window, shining on a woman reading in a chair. It took me a minute to realize it was Cam, my mom's wife. When I tried to speak, all that came out was a croak. Cam noticed and quickly pressed the call button for help. A nurse came in with a smile, checked my vitals, and asked how I was feeling. I could only manage another croak in response. After a short while, she came back with some ice chips that tasted better than the best scotch. Cam held my hand and dialed the phone with the other hand. "I'm so relieved to see you awake, Mark. You really scared us. How are you feeling?" "I feel like I got hit by a freaking truck." "A truck?" "Man, when the doc walked in, I was so relieved to see you awake after being out for 3 days in a coma. I think you're finally on the mend, huh? Are you up for some grub? I could eat a whole cow, horns and all, just as long as it's cleaned real good." Everyone thought it was funny, but when I tried to laugh along, the pain in my chest was so bad I almost passed out. Before leaving, the doc upped my pain meds and showed me how to press the button for more morphine, promising me it would help soon. I was all messed up on morphine and felt like I was half asleep for hours. Phil filled me in on what had gone down just an hour before he showed up. Turns out, I got attacked in my own crib and the neighborhood watch saw my front door wide open. They called the cops and ambulance when they found me all bloody. Thank God I had Phil's number saved in my phone under ICE, just in case. It's been crazy since then. Either he or Cam has been sticking by me non-stop. He told me my injuries were no joke: a messed up leg, a busted arm, 2 cracked ribs, a punctured lung, a popped kidney, a messed up eye socket, and a broken nose. But he still said I was okay, which made me chuckle, but also made me cough a bit. Luckily, the pain eased up once they said I was out of danger. Cam and Phil took off to head home, and then a detective walked in. So this guy comes up to me, says he's Detective Graham Cole. He starts asking me about the attack, so I spill everything. When I mention the message from the assailant's leader, he gets super interested. And then he practically freaks out when I tell him I have a DNA sample on my handkerchief. He bags it up as evidence right away. After I finish talking, I close my eyes for a second, and when I open them, he's gone, and the room is dark. Next day, Phil comes by and promises to help me out whenever I need it. I got released from the hospital and crashed at his place until I could move around again. I asked him to grab my mail and he said he would on his way back. I also asked about good divorce lawyers and he said he knew one and would reach out to her. We chatted for a while until I dozed off again. The nurse woke me up while changing my bandages, making sure they were clean and infection-free. Food came soon after, but eating with one arm was a challenge, so I needed the nurse's help. I had a good night's sleep and woke up feeling great when the nurse gave me a bed bath. I couldn't even think about getting aroused because of the discomfort. Then Phil showed up with a beautiful woman named Grace Miles, who he said was my new lawyer. We talked about my problems and she confirmed my visitation rights with the kids. She agreed to take on my case. Before he left, Phil gave me the mail he collected and as I went through it, I found the DNA results. At first, I was annoyed but then I found it funny. Jen had tricked both Carl and me. So, after me and Phil had a chat about this crazy situation, we couldn't help but laugh together. I then called up Grace and asked her to help me set up a meeting at the hospital with Jen, Carl, and their lawyer. I had a change of heart and wanted to sort things out. Grace set up a meeting in a makeshift office for the next day. The expression on Jen's face was priceless when I rolled in with my arm and leg in casts, tubes everywhere, bruises all over me. Jen looked genuinely shocked. When I got there, Carl just smirked and started talking to the people who don't like me. I spoke nicely after some of your friends came to see me. I've changed my mind, Carl, there's no use denying you're involved. The last thing your thug said was to sign the papers. Who else would say that unless you sent them? My lawyer has drawn up a new paper for me to sign, so you can adopt the kids, but without the $2 million bribe. My lawyer said your old paper made it seem like I was basically offering you the kids, which could get me in trouble for trafficking because it's illegal to sell people. But I gotta give you props for trying. I gave the paperwork to their lawyer, who seemed kinda guilty about it. Then I talked to my lawyer and we came up with a new deal for you to think about. It's all laid out here. My lawyer gave the docs to their lawyer and made copies for Jen and Carl to look over. Then I brought it up again, pointing out how this agreement is way different from the last one. Your plan is completely different from mine. Let me break it down for you. First of all, I'm keeping everything in my house, including my wife's jewelry, my money, my business, and both cars. On top of that, she needs to transfer the whole balance of her not-so-secret account with Myrtle Credit, which is about $188,000, into my lawyer's account. That money is rightfully mine, I earned it. You have no right to it, my wife angrily declared, her face turning red and a vein throbbing in her neck. Carl shot her a dirty look. Confused look. I bet he didn't know about her secret account. I think finding out about it was the beginning of the end for their relationship. If Carl wasn't so keen on having kids, he might have dumped her then and there. With a smirk, Carl nudged her back into her seat. Shut up, you lying, cheating woman, and stay seated. The grown-ups are talking, and that doesn't include you. Everyone was trying not to laugh, except for Phil, who was quietly chuckling. Jen's face went from red to white in a second, but she... All right, so, before I got cut off, I was saying that since she makes way more money, she's gonna have to fork over $20,500 a month for spousal support straight to my lawyer's account. And on top of that, as compensation for ending our marriage and causing me harm, she's gotta cough up $10 million after taxes, which will also go into my lawyer's account. This money will cover all my medical bills, legal fees, and whatever else my lawyer says I need. And just so we're clear, all these payments better be made on time. 500 on Friday. Carl was just standing there laughing like crazy. You're out of your mind if you think we're gonna pay you anything. We got what we needed, so just go. 20%, that's what I said. 20%. I heard you the first time, but what does that even mean? That's the amount of revenue we expect you to lose in the first 2 years after we take you to court for wrecking my marriage and alienating my family. Did you just come up with that number out of nowhere? No, I looked into your company's clients thoroughly. They pay you money. Your company is on the stock market and you can find all the info on the website. Think about how this will look for your dad's campaign for Congress, where he's all about family values. And don't forget about the clients you work with, a lot of them are big shots in politics and entertainment, all handled by your PR team. If there's even a hint of scandal, they'll bail on you. Plus, your ed department works with important clients like Children's. So, there's this clothing store, a baby product company, and a sports gear manufacturer. They're gonna drop you like a hot potato as soon as things go south. There's gonna be a meeting and you're gonna be the fall guy. So, $10 million is a steal. Carl's smug face disappeared and he looked sick. My lawyer will give you the final amount and it better be in her account by 5 o'clock on Friday. No one said anything, but I could tell Carl was still trying to find a way out. But I kept going. Carl, if you think disappearing will solve your problems, think again. I've got tricks up my sleeve. I spilled the whole story to 5 lawyers from out of town, and if anything happens to me, they'll spill it to the media. The way Carl looked when we left confirmed my suspicions about what he was thinking. He seemed totally defeated. As we were leaving, I reminded him that it was 5 p.m. on Friday. Later, when Grace and I got back to my room, she asked me why I caved and let Carl adopt my kids despite my doubts. I showed her the DNA test results to examine, and once she saw them, she burst out laughing. You sneaky devil, she said. The kids are his. They ain't yours, who are they? I dunno, but I'm gonna figure it out. Shows she was two-timing me and Carl at the same time, and when I found out, Carl will too. Mark, I wouldn't want to be on your bad side. You should have been a lawyer, you'd be great at it. Thanks, but I don't have that killer instinct. Actually, you do, you just haven't unleashed it yet. Later that day, the doc came to see me and said I could go home if I had someone to help me. The next day, Phil and Kim offered me a place to crash temporarily. Even though I had to go to the hospital twice a week for changing clothes and kidney tests, I was looking forward to Friday because that's when my attorney called to tell me that $10,861.312 had been deposited into the holding account. I felt like I had hit the jackpot, or at least richer than before. Grace had already taken her share and transferred the rest to my checking account. After 8 weeks of support from my friends, I finally came home, but it just didn't feel the same. I felt lonely and the atmosphere was dull. So, during a chat with Greg at work, I decided to move closer to my beloved sister for a fresh start. I told them I was leaving, congratulated them on their great work, and even gave them control of the company while I was gone. I took them out to dinner, then swung by to see my buddies Phil and Cam. Over dinner, I handed them a check for $1.5 million to cover my medical bills. Just trying to take care of things before I leave, you know. I was kinda unsure at first, but I told them Carl's company was picking up the tab, so it wasn't costing me anything. They were cool with it. I mentioned my plans to move to New York to be near my sister while we were having a glass of wine. Phil asked about my house, and I said I might rent it out. He got worried and finally spilled the beans that his son Eric, who had just graduated with an engineering degree, was having a baby with his fiancée but didn't have a place to live. They didn't want to burden Phil and his wife, so Phil asked if they could. When my friends asked if they could rent my house, I was stoked to help them out and give a home to a young couple. I told Phil to set a fair rent and save the rest for their kids' education. Kim gave me a hug that almost crushed my ribs, and Phil got all teary-eyed. The next day, I called up Patty to fill her in and see if I could crash at her place for a bit. She was thrilled and started planning things for us to do. 3 weeks later, I locked up my house and hit the road. Last time, I was crying a bit on my way to Phil's to give back the keys I gave Jan when I fired him from his job and suggested he give his car to his son as a housewarming present. After we hugged and said our emotional goodbyes, promising to keep in touch, I hit the road. I had a chill 2-hour drive and finally made it to Patty's place. I took my time, stopping whenever I felt like it. When I got there, Patty greeted me with big hugs, only letting go when I needed to catch my breath. She showed me to my room and told me that we were gonna. Me and my buddy decided to grab some dinner together, so I threw on some casual clothes, slacks and a shirt. We ended up at this cute diner with a bunch of waiters and a fully stocked bar. When we walked in, I realized I had been set up. Jen's sister Amy was already sitting at our table. At first, I was a little pissed off, but Patty's charm quickly calmed me down. Amy greeted Patty with a big hug before surprising me with a hug of her own, where she made it clear she can't stand Jen and wishes she was dead. Turns out, Amy lives nearby and works nearby too. So, we were at this advertising party and the night was going pretty well. Amy was the one who dragged me onto the dance floor first when the time came. We did a few waltzes and a slow dance before heading back to a happy Patricia. "You guys look so cute together out there, like a real couple," she said with a grin. Then Amy suddenly had to go to the bathroom, so I quickly made an excuse and left. I spent the rest of the night dancing with Amy and Patty, making sure to avoid any slow songs. Eventually, we called a cab for Amy and booked another one for. So, when we got back home, I teased Patty about being the one to plan the event, but she just laughed and went to bed. The next day, we started house hunting. I wanted a house instead of an apartment because I enjoy having a yard to take care of and mowing the lawn. Plus, it's perfect for hosting barbecues and parties. Even though the house prices are high in New York City suburbs, I finally decided to take the plunge after weeks of searching. I settled on a 3-bedroom starter home with a kitchen, dining room, and a separate living room. The backyard and front yard were pretty good, but what got me excited was that it's in a gated community with only one entrance guarded by security. The community has cool stuff like a pool, gym, and play area, plus they offer babysitting services. Patty teased about moving in with me, but I didn't take it too seriously. Before moving in, I had to furnish and decorate the place, and also buy essentials like towels, pots, and pans. Luckily, it already had kitchen appliances, but I still had to fill up the fridge with food. You know, Amy and her crew really came through for me when I was buying my place. They made sure it had a feminine vibe and felt cozy, not like a dude's man cave. I dedicated one room as my workspace, decked out with a fancy computer I built myself, a workbench, lots of cabinets, and a fireproof safe. Patty and Amy even pushed me to throw a housewarming party since I didn't know anyone in the area. The guest list was mostly their peeps. Amy's friends apparently wanted me to meet new people, and it worked. I ended up swapping contact info with a bunch of folks and chatting on social media. The house was constantly buzzing with parties and BBQs every weekend, and I was loving the attention. I barely even thought about Jen. Amy and I were getting closer, but we weren't officially dating. One night, I was supposed to go with Amy to a party at the theater, but it got cancelled. Last minute, he said he had a stomach ache, so Amy and I went to watch The Taming of the Shrew alone. Amy then stretched out and held my hand, which was surprising since we had only exchanged a peck on the cheek before. After the show, we took a taxi back to Amy's apartment complex. As I walked her to the door, the taxi drove off, leaving us stranded. I cursed quietly, knowing it would be impossible to find another cab so far from town. Amy chuckled and suggested that I stay the night since walking to Miles's house was too far. All right, so she leaned in for this crazy passionate kiss, grabbing my hand and leading me inside. We wasted no time, she took me to her bedroom, and next thing I knew, we were all caught up in a steamy embrace. I was standing there in her bedroom, feeling a bit confused, when she asked me, "What's a girl gotta do to get with you?" I had been waiting for so long, I figured it was time to make a move. With those words, she led me to the bed and it was amazing. Time flew by and I was left wondering, what did you do to me? My sister must be crazy to let you go. I gotta thank her for making me never want to be apart from you. Maybe I didn't want to leave that bed, tired but happy. We just lay there till morning, then dozed off again. We finally woke up around 1 p.m. and figured food was more important than another round in bed. So we headed to the deli next door, got some lunch and coffee. After dinner, we went back to Amy's place and talked about what's been going on. Amy confessed she's had a thing for me since we first met and had been secretly crushing on me. After me and my girl split, her sister opened up to the crew about her feelings and wanted their help to get us back together. The crew was hyped and thought I'd be down for her once I got over Jen. I admitted I was into her ever since I met her at parties, but I didn't want to make a move on my ex's sister cause it felt shady. I didn't want it to seem like I was just rebounding. I kept my distance, but Amy was understanding. Thanks for thinking about how she felt before doing anything, but she also mentioned she was getting impatient. She spilled the beans that she and the gang had orchestrated the events of last night. We had a good laugh about their scheme, and Amy quickly texted Patty, "Mission completed. I'm still in last night's outfit and need to change." Amy came with me to help me pick out a new outfit. Unlike her sister, Amy seemed relaxed and at ease, without the usual anxiety that came with Jen's emotions. We just focused on the situation at hand. Patty was super happy about us being in a new relationship multiple times while I was busy working on my idea. The software and technology one developed ended up being really versatile, like it could be used for military stuff, gaming, aeronautics for both big and small planes, and even in cars. I decided to pitch it to a big gaming company, thinking that players testing it out would help find any issues right off the bat. They were kinda skeptical at first because they thought they had the best programmers. But when I showed them my dope technique, they agreed to a 3-month trial. During the trial, I gave them a locked unit with tamper-proof software. After the trial, they had a meeting with my sister, a business lawyer, and a negotiation expert. We talked about what to do next. The gaming company showed interest in buying the patents for a sweet $120 million, knowing they could make even more money from worldwide game sales. I turned down an offer to sell the rights to manufacture my technology and instead agreed to a 10-year deal for $50 million upfront and a 1% cut of all profits made from using my tech. After some back and forth, we settled on $65 million upfront and a 0.5% cut. We signed contracts and sealed the deal with a handshake. I now have agreements in place with big military aircraft companies, civil aviation companies, and a car manufacturer. My bank account got a major boost and I'm now worth over $250 million after taxes. I just got a crazy prediction that I'll have over $3.5 billion in 10 years. I was shook by how much money I could make and started looking into investment options. Playing it safe, I figured just leaving it in the bank would get me over $122,000 in interest before taxes. Amy and I moved in together, and she decided to rent out her place. Meanwhile, my sister found a new lawyer and they were getting pretty serious. It's been over a year since I left to start fresh, and I think it's time to make some moves. I wanted to get back at those 2 jerks who caused me so much pain. I told Amy I wanted payback on her sister and asked if she was cool with it. She was all in, saying to burn that bridge and she'd help out however she could. We brainstormed some ideas but decided to hold off on our revenge for a bit. Right after dinner, the phone rang. It was the ADA from Freestone, Texas. They had nabbed the bastards. Peasants attacked me and needed my statement in 3 weeks, so I said yes. When the time came, Amy wanted to come with me, so we decided to make it a quick vacation and get there a week before the trial. We drove 600 miles to Texas where Phil picked us up at the airport and brought us to our motel. As a thank you, we took Phil and came out to dinner at the Regency Club restaurant. Cam and Amy looked amazing in their fancy clothes, showing up Phil and me. Phil wore his best suit while I wore my new $2,000 handcrafted outfit. Dressed to the nines in our fancy Italian suits, the four of us looked like rich tourists. We had never been to this restaurant before because it was too pricey, but thanks to my recent cash flow, we pulled up in a limo to make it extra special for Phil and Cameron. A doorman in uniform opened our car doors for us, and then we were greeted by Ed, the head waiter, as we walked into the restaurant. Soft music was playing, setting the mood. Phil and Cam were hyped for the night ahead. Before we got started, we had a light appetizer of melon and thinly sliced Parma ham. Then we chose our main meal, which was accompanied by a fruit salad. To finish off, we had both a rich red wine and a white dessert wine. As we neared the end of our meal, we started thinking about hitting the dance floor. I glanced around and saw Jen and her husband Carl sitting across from us with another couple. I pointed them out to everyone, which made Amy suddenly need to use the restroom, and Kim followed her. Their coordinated exit was quite something. It was weird when the couple walked past Jen's table and Amy stopped to say hi to us, pointing at Phil and me. Jen looked surprised and put her hand to her mouth in shock. Whatever Amy said next made Kim laugh as they kept walking, leaving Jen looking nervous. She quickly left the restaurant without saying anything. Carl came in right after. When the ladies came back, I asked what made Amy react like that. Kim explained that after greeting Jen, she asked who Amy was with, and Amy replied, "I'm with someone else." "Did you see that rich guy pointing at me over there? He told me he's grateful that I left my husband because we're meant to be together. I don't get why you're with that boring guy you dumped." Anyway, she said that and then walked off. The rest of the night was just dancing and having a great time, especially when Amy was chatting with her sister. Since Cam and Phil were working, Amy and I did some touristy stuff like sightseeing and going to a shooting range. Turns out, Amy's a natural with guns. I was pretty surprised. Last night was lit. We went out for dinner and hit the dance floor hard. The day before the trial started, we had dinner at Phil and Cam's place. And let me tell you, home-cooked food beats eating out any day. After dinner, Phil broke the news that his son is tying the knot in the spring, so we all raised a glass to the happy couple. Before the trial kicked off, we met with the assistant district attorney, who assured us it would be a piece of cake. And thanks to my gift of his DNA, we nabbed the ringleader of the gang. So, turns out he's been violent before, this being his third offense. They pressured him to snitch on his buddies who were already locked up. Their trials would come after his, and with his testimony, they were looking at some serious punishments. Oh, and that guy I punched in the throat. Turns out he can barely talk now, sounds like a frog. But none of them wanted to rat out Carl Prescott. The cops think Prescott paid them off to keep quiet, especially about his son. Plotting to kill someone would really piss off his big shot dad, a congressman. We were at all three trials and I was happy with the outcome. The main guy got a shorter 15-year sentence for snitching on his buddies. The guy who I heard was the one who actually did the killing only got 2 years since he didn't really do much in the attack. The other guy got 5 years, his first time getting in trouble. When we said our goodbyes, Phil and Cam drove us to the airport. I gave Phil an envelope and told him not to open it until after we left. Inside were So, I gave the deed to my old house as a wedding gift for his kid, knowing how easily marriages can fall apart. When we got back home and unpacked, I snuck off to my office and called my sister to invite her over for dinner on Friday night without telling Amy. When Friday rolled around, I told Amy we were going out to eat with Patty and her boyfriend. Amy was excited, and that night we went to a fancy restaurant that I had booked weeks in advance. We sipped our wine and enjoyed a lovely evening. So, there was this dude dressed up like a gypsy who came up to our table playing a romantic song on his violin. The whole restaurant was watching as I got down on one knee and asked Amy to marry me. Her face was priceless as she said yes, all while everyone else in the place was cheering and clapping. Patty gave Amy a big hug, welcoming her into the family. We partied all night long, and then the limo took us home. We set our wedding for early spring and sent out the invites right away. I smartly let Amy and Patty handle most of the planning. I took the lead and we picked a church close by for the wedding. I also booked a whole floor at the Hilton for our out-of-town guests to stay for 3 days. The wedding was amazing and everyone loved it. Phil and Kim said they haven't had that much fun in years and even invited us to their son's wedding in 2 months. Amy and I went on a 2-week cruise in the Caribbean with parties every night and daily trips. When we got back, we were completely exhausted and just wanted to go on another vacation. Luckily, I had put together a team to fix any problems that might come up with my new app and hardware, so I had some free time on my hands. I decided to focus on the next part of my revenge plan. I took my time, playing the long game without rushing. 9 months later, our son James was born, followed by his sister Sarah a year later. We moved to a bigger house in a gated community. By then, I had made some money and was becoming a bit of a public figure, attending events. Me and Amy went to a bunch of charity events and gave generously. We even ended up in society magazines as the perfect couple. But as time went on, I stayed focused on getting revenge for the pain my ex-wife caused me when she left me for someone else almost 9 years ago. It was time for phase 1 of my plan. Over the last 5 years, I hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Jen Carl and anyone connected to her, especially her ex-boss Troy Simmons. I had a feeling Troy was up to something shady. Dude, so get this, I found out that the father of Jen's twins is actually Troy. And get this, Jane was hooking up with Troy and 2 other dudes at the same time. And as if that wasn't enough drama, Carl was out there banging his personal assistant and a bunch of other girls on the side. So, I decided to take action and sent Carl a sample of the twins and Troy's DNA, along with a note saying he's sterile. Game over, man. Yo, so basically, the DNA from the markings didn't match Troy Simmons's. Like, come on, do the math. It was clear that them twins weren't mine, proving that Jen was messing around with Troy while she was supposed to be with Carl. She was straight up cheating on both of us at the same time. So, I sent Carl some proof of Jen's affairs and just waited for the drama to unfold. About 2 months later, Phil called me up saying Carl had kicked Jen to the curb and used their prenup to his advantage. Jen lost custody of the kids she adopted and vanished into thin air. Naomi called her folks only to find out her dad had sent her some cash and then cut off contact. Phase 1 was done. Jen felt the betrayal and heartbreak of losing her kids. She still had access to her email, so I decided to shake things up by sending her the private investigator's report on Carl, along with some incriminating photos of him with other women. That should teach her a lesson. After sorting things out during the divorce process, a few days later Amy and I were chilling watching an old movie when the intercom at the security gate buzzed. The guard asked if a Mrs. Prescott could come to our place. I told him to hold on a sec so I could talk to Amy. She looked just as confused as I was, but agreed to let her in to hear what she had to say. I told the guard to allow her in and a few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Amy opened it to reveal a hot mess standing there. Her hair was a mess, no makeup, and she looked like she rolled out of bed. Amy motioned for her to come in, and as she walked in, I could tell she couldn't even look me in the eye. Amy offered her coffee, and she took it. Jen sat down opposite me, but wouldn't meet my gaze, so I had to start the conversation. I was still mad at her, but also felt a little sorry for the broken person in front of me, a person I had a hand in breaking. I felt guilty for a moment until I remembered what she did to me. OMG, it was awful. I said when I saw her crying her eyes out. It took us forever to calm her down enough to talk. She was sobbing so hard, but she managed to tell us that he found out the twins weren't his and that I was seeing Troy while we were together. He got all mad and kicked me out with just the clothes on my back. I still had my car keys and laptop in my car, along with a few other things. Got 10 grand in my account, so I booked a motel, but nobody wanted to chat with me after what I did to you. Lost all my buddies and my fam disowned me. Tried calling Barry's dad, who said he's got a new heir to the family fortune and doesn't need me anymore. Reached out to my pops, who reluctantly agreed to chat and sent me some cash, telling me not to call again. Nowhere else to go, so I used the rest of my money to come here, hoping Amy would cut me some slack. I know you wouldn't help me out. Give me a hand if I was in a tough spot, but I don't expect any help from you if it means anything. I'm sorry for how I acted. I was selfish and mean. I know I messed up, but I miss my kids and I want them back. I might not have been a great wife, but I was a damn good mom. She stopped her rehearsed speech and looked at us like a wounded animal, even though she knew what she was saying was true. I couldn't help but feel for her. She was having a rough time, and I really didn't like Carl because he caused me a lot of pain. His payback was coming soon. There was also a score to settle with a good old beating, but that could wait. When Amy asked Jen if she was hungry, she said she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Amy quickly made some bacon, eggs, hash browns, pancakes, and syrup. Jen scarfed it all down and asked for more coffee, which Amy happily brought. After that, Amy took her to the guest bedroom for a shower. So, Jen was busy, and Amy found some clothes that would fit her. She left them on the bed while Jen showered and got dressed. Amy and I talked about what to do with our unexpected guest. Despite Amy not liking Jen much, she felt obligated to support her because of family ties. I kind of agreed, mostly just to annoy Carl with Jen's persistence. We decided to let Jen stay in the guest room for now while we figured out a better plan. Tomorrow, Amy planned to take Jen shopping at Walmart for some new clothes. When she came back downstairs, she looked way more refreshed. We told her the good news about her situation, which made her cry again. After that, we all went to bed. Amy and I stayed up late talking and trying to figure out how to solve the problem. I usually get up early to hit the gym and pool, but Jen was already up, making coffee and toast. Amy was already at the table eating, so I joined her. Then Jen came down too. "Mark, I wasn't expecting such a nice welcome. I'm really surprised." "Hey Jen, I'm grateful and honestly speechless about what you did. It really hurt me, but I think you get it now after going through your own family troubles. I think you finally realize how much pain you caused me. But because of Amy and the love we have, I'm starting to forgive you. I'll never forget what you did, but I'm not gonna keep thinking about it. No need to apologize anymore, let's just move on. A new chapter has started, and this morning I want you to go shopping with Amy. Got some basics at Walmart while I look for a place for you to stay. We can get you some nicer clothes later. I'm heading to the gym now, see you later." When I got back home, the girls were out and the kids were at school, so I started looking for a place for Jen. I took a shot and reached out to the housing officer in our gated community, who told me about a 1-bedroom starter home for rent just 2 streets over. I was pleasantly surprised to find it fully furnished when I checked it out. So the guy, who's a military dude stationed in Europe for 3 years, wanted to rent out his place. After checking me out real good, I paid a year's rent and the security deposit up front. When the girl came back with a ton of clothes, I told her the good news. Amy just smiled and blew me a kiss, while Jen hugged me and cried tears of gratitude. Then she got all confused. I don't know what got into me to risk our marriage like that. It was like I got zapped by some alien seductress. I really screwed up. Hey, before you go, make sure to look after him. He's a good guy and you won't find anyone better. After she left, I went upstairs to cry in private. I told Amy about my plan to help Jen and screw over Carl and his dad. The next day, we spent time getting stuff for Jen's new place. We filled up Amy's van and arranged for the rest to be delivered. I was worried there wouldn't be enough room in the house for all the stuff, but the girls managed to find a spot for everything. We wanted Jen to feel totally free, so we hooked her up with some cash and a credit card, kinda like my Annie's magic purse from Harry Potter. We sent $10,000 to her bank account and gave her a credit card with a $1,000 monthly limit. There were tears and hugs all over that night as we laid in bed. Amy told me how proud she was that I didn't kick Jen while she was down and showed her some compassion. I just hoped Jen learned something from all this and would do better in the future. Hey, so the next day we all went over to Jen's place to help her move in. Even though we tried to pitch in, Jen was determined to do everything herself and started cleaning every little corner, even though it was already pretty clean. After that, she called us over for dinner and made a big deal about wanting to make something special for us. She even got a babysitter for the kids so we could all walk over to her place. Once we got there, Jen sat us down and served up an amazing lunch with top-notch stuff. So, we had some beef, baked potatoes, and a bunch of veggies, like those awesome beans mixed with carrot sticks and parsnips covered in garlic butter and honey, all wrapped up in foil and baked for 25 minutes. For dessert, she served up some baked apple pastry stuffed with raisins and topped with ice cream. We left feeling totally stuffed. Over the next few weeks, Jen got comfortable and Amy and I promised to help her out with her divorce. I set up a meeting with a lawyer that Patty Brian Scott recommended. When I got there, I filled him in on Jen's situation. Even though he was worried about how she was treating me, he still decided to be her lawyer. Our main goal was to get custody of the kids back. I didn't care about money issues because I said I would handle those. I came up with a plan that I had already allowed Carl to go along with, hinting that the kids might not be mine biologically. But then, when Ryan started questioning things, I had to admit that I turned down a $1 million offer for the kids and let Carl adopt them without any financial incentive. Instead, I was aiming for a $10 million payout. Basically, Carl and XYZ Advertising had to settle for emotional distress. They made a deal to protect XYZ's reputation with a non-disclosure agreement. Brian wanted to know if he was the real dad, so I did a DNA test that proved Troy Simons was the father. This meant the adoption wasn't legit and Carl couldn't claim the kids. Jen could get them back. It wasn't just for Jen though, it would also impact Carl and his dad. But my main concern was, I did it for the kids' sake. I knew they were loved, they just needed someone with the same last name to keep the family business going. Brian said he would take care of it and get back to me that night. I told Amy what I did and she totally supported my choice. We asked Jen to come over. At first, Jen seemed unsure, but once I explained everything, she hugged me thankfully. However, she soon realized how important her actions were and stepped back, covering her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion and apologizing. We reassured her. He basically said not to stress about it and that was it. A couple days later, Brian reached out to me wanting to meet at his office and insisting that I bring Jen with me, since he was representing her and not me. The three of us met at his office, where he laid out his plan. First, he suggested filing a motion to cancel the adoption. Then, he planned to inform the district attorney's office that both Carl Prescott and his dad Barry Prescott had tried to get 2 kids, which goes against the anti-slavery law from 1865. And lastly, they had pressured Mr. Mark Adams was tricked into agreeing to the adoption, even though it wasn't valid because the kids weren't actually Mr. Adams' kids, as proven by DNA tests. Mrs. Prescott is demanding her kids back ASAP, since they're being held against her wishes. She plans to sue Mr. Troy Simons for pressuring Mrs. Adams to cheat on her husband just to keep her job. Legal action is also being taken against Mr. Carl Prescott for coercing Mrs. Adams into a relationship that led to the end of her marriage. Court cases are on the horizon. So, XYZ Advertising is basically cool with and even supports the whole thing between CEO Carl Prescott and Barry Prescott. Mark is gonna sue Troy Simons for messing up his marriage with Jennifer Adams. And Adams is gonna sue Carl Prescott for ruining his marriage too. And on top of all that, XYZ Advertising is gonna get sued for not sticking to their morals clause in employee contracts. Crazy stuff, right? So, I heard about Mr. Simons and Mrs. Adams' little fling. Turns out XYZ Advertising might be in some deep sh*t for not sticking to their morals clause and basically encouraging Mr. Carl Prescott and Mrs. Adams to wreck their marriage. Oh, and Mr. Mark Adams apparently signed some non-disclosure agreement for $10 million and better be ready to pay up if needed. Brian's proposal seems to be causing a stir, involving not just XYZ Advertising, but also Troy Carl and his crew. Hey Barry, we were all totally shocked by what happened. It was way beyond anything I had expected. I told Jen to get ready for things to get worse and to be prepared for the consequences. She knew she brought it on herself and was prepared for the fallout. I told Brian to move forward as soon as possible. I'm gonna expose XYZ to the media with a big campaign targeting Troy Simons, Carl Prescott, Barry Prescott, and XYZ Advertising. Brian said he's on board. So, in 2 weeks Carl and Barry are gonna try to undo the adoption and get Jen back with her kids. When we left Brian's office, we were feeling determined and I could feel justice coming. Even though Brian was trying to get custody back, Carl and Barry got a team of lawyers ready to fight the case in the second week. Brian did what he said he would do, and I sent the evidence to the media. A week later, the media got hold of it and things started moving faster in court. So, the moment the courthouse started investigating and people's houses were being looked into, I knew trouble was coming. Clients from XYZ PR and advertising started dropping like flies, either canceling their contracts or threatening to. This led to a big emergency meeting of the XYZ board, and Troy Simons got fired without getting any severance. Carl and Barry Prescott couldn't take the heat and decided to quit to try and keep their big clients. They also agreed to pay me and Jen a good amount of money, on top of what I was already expecting from before. Man, those court battles could easily make back the $10 million I had to pay for not keeping things hush-hush during all that chaos. But hey, there was a bright side for the American folks. Congressman Barry Prescott stepped down due to health issues jeopardizing his re-election bid focused on family values. And wouldn't you know it, right after he left, they found some shady stuff in his campaign funds, like splurging on a cruise and hiring some sketchy ladies during the election. He even got served with a summons from some fancy committee. So, the FBI was all up in his business, checking out his behavior just a month after I spilled the beans to the media. But don't worry, they looked into it and Jen got her kids back. Amy and I even took Jen and the kids to her parents' house to make amends. I told her folks that I forgave her, and even though we ain't gonna be besties, we're at least cool. I convinced them to forgive her too, especially since they were meeting their grandkids for the first time. Barry Prescott really broke their hearts when he got busted for misusing campaign money and got slapped with a 3-year prison stint. And then there's Carl Prescott, who got caught trying to traffic 2 babies and also got caught stealing company funds and stashing them in offshore accounts. How did he think he could get away with that? He got hit with a 5-year sentence in federal prison, even though he was supposed to only get 3 years. But he wouldn't spill the beans. Yo, so basically, that missing cash that dude was looking for. Yeah, I had it all along. My revenge for him planning to attack me was to bribe the prison guard to put him in a cell with a drug dealer who's into guys. On another note, Jen moved to a bigger house, passed her bar exams again, and now works at the same law firm as Patty. We still see each other's kids sometimes, but we never hang out. Jen hasn't gone on a date since then, she's just focused on her job and taking care of the kids. Thanks for listening. Hey there. If you liked this article, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you've got a story to share about your own situation or someone else's, feel free to reach out to me. Take care.